Hey folks, it's Friday, or you might be watching it another day, but regardless, this is the wrap up. I have some amazing folks around me eating dinner. eating dinner. Uh, we have the return of our friend Jeremy Blum. Jeremy is back and eating
Hello.
KFC. we have
And enjoying every second of it.
and enjoying it. Jeremy's food came fairly on time for the wrap up. Unlike last time when it came when it got sent to the wrong place, and then you had to order
Yeah.
again. And
That
then,
that happened. That happened again with that same app. It was a mess.
so question is, did you keep the app or did you delete it?
We've got the app because it allows wider access to restaurants in New York City. So I mean,
Fair.
yeah.
It's just a
Fair.
gamble. It's just a gamble every single time.
But look at this good fried chicken. This is the stuff that this is like real life potion of healing right here.
Oh yeah.
You know who doesn't need healing? Dampiers, the new lineage in DSC.
Oh, that.
Oh.
That.
Is that our segue?
Okay.
That's not our
Are we just-
segue. No, because
That's
I'm not
not
gonna
segues.
I'm not gonna go I'm not
Hey,
gonna
you
go
keep
from like
segueing.
I'm not gonna go from welcome back Jeremy to let's talk about D&D, because we also have Emma and Adam Ali, fairly regular members of Asians Represent. Adam Ali of our Critical Read Al-Qadim series, and Emma of our Asians Read Karatur the Eastern Realms series. I have my co-hosts Steve and Agatha. And you know what? This is just going to be a good time. We're eating dinner right now because, well, we're going to be at a con after this. At a very international con. We're going to be at Session Zero Con. We're actually going to be the inaugural panel at the convention, and we're going to be talking about just how we put all of this together, just how we put Asians Represent together, what we do, what are our plans, and what are kind of the strategies that we employed to get us that any, to make us successful and to earn us some respect in the tabletop gaming space. So we're going to be talking about that after. If you are watching this on YouTube, I don't have an answer for you because I don't know if Session Zero Con panels are going to be available afterwards. But if you follow us at AZNS Represent on Twitter, you will find out because that's where we post all of our latest updates on content. That said, we are going to be talking about a couple of things. You know, when we were planning this panel, we were like, okay, what are we going to talk about? The tabletop gaming scene has kind of honestly been a little bit quiet compared to before. We've got a topic for next week. We're going to be talking about Star Wars. I got Adam Ali is coming on. Jason Liu, who is a comic book artist in Toronto, is going to be joining us. And I think we're going to have one more spot if anybody wants to come talk about Asian representation in Star Wars and wider representation in Star Wars. That's going to happen. But for this week, we were like, okay, what are we going to talk about? And then Wizards drops their new Unearthed Arcana. And in their Unearthed Arcana, which they titled Gothic Lineages, which I think was honestly the first mistake, calling it Gothic Lineages, they actually provided a toolkit for actually modifying your character's lineage, who your character is, or creating characters with supernatural or paranormal ancestry. A couple significant things about the new Unearthed Arcana, and it's they actually put a design note, an amendment on racial traits. So I'll read it out since we haven't been doing a lot of reading on this stream. I say that sarcastically. Of course, we do so much reading. But in this design note, it's on page 2 of the Unearthed Arcana. They said, in 2020, the book Tasha's Cauldron of Everything introduced the option to customize several of your character's racial traits, specifically the ability score, increased trait, the language trait, and traits that give skill, armor, weapon, or tool proficiencies. Following in that book's footsteps, the race options in this article and in future D&D books lack the ability score increased trait, the language trait, the alignment trait, and any other trait that is purely cultural. Racial traits henceforth reflect only the physical or magical realities of being a player character who's a member of a particular lineage. As such, such traits include things like dark vision, a breath weapon, as in the Dragonborn, or innate magical ability, as in the Forest Gnome. Such traits don't include cultural characteristics like language or training with a weapon or a tool. And the traits also don't include an alignment suggestion, since alignment is a choice for each individual, not a characteristic shared by a lineage. Finally, going forward, the term race in D&D refers only to the suite of game features used by player characters. Said features don't have any bearing on monsters and NPCs who are members of the same species or lineage, since monsters and NPCs in D&D don't rely on race or class to function. Moreover, DMs are empowered to customize the features of the creatures in their game as they wish. So Wizards put this in there, and then they included a couple of different lineages. They included Dampier, they included Hexblood, and Reborn, all of which I think are actually pretty interesting. I personally want to play all of them because I think they all have something really neat in them.
I'm all for it.
This
is this is future Ravenloft content, and I like Ravenloft.
Yeah. Like, you know what
this is going to be like Van Richter's guide to monsters in like 2022 or something like that.
So here's the thing, like, yeah, you see, this is like the future of Ravenloft, but like some of these things don't have to be like innately like a Gothic.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah,
they don't.
Right? Like, what if I want to play like a Jiangshi?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Or what if I want to play, any form of undead from various cultures that are not associated with sort of the Gothic art movement? I could do that. The Hexblood, same thing. Right? These are all really neat. But before we get into them, I want to talk about the design note they made on racial traits, and what this means for D&D, and what this Unearthed Arcana kind of presents us. What it kind of says about what D&D is going to look like moving forward. There are a couple things here that I know we should probably address starting off, and it's the term race, right? I know a lot of people will be like, you know what, just remove race entirely from D&D. It's difficult to do that. I'll say that outright. Like, while I think like Ancestry, in the way that they did it with Pathfinder 2nd Edition, is a better choice, it's ultimately really hard for Wizards to remove race from D&D or from the current edition of D&D, because they have all of these products that are already published using that terminology. So moving forward with 5th edition, I think they're going to be very clear with these design notes and these amendments to their language on how race is supposed to mean this. So I wanted to start with that because I know there are going to be people who would be like, well, why don't they just remove it entirely? And that's very difficult. And we have to think about it from a product perspective as well. But I want to know, like, what do you folks think about the new Unearthed Arcana? Like, starting with this statement on racial traits.
I'm struggling. And the reason why I'm struggling is because I don't know if I like this way to go about doing it. Unearthed Arcana by its nature can change, and it's up for player feedback. And I don't know if I kind of want something like this to be up for player feedback right now, considering that even though there are some great players, like the people around me who've played D&D, or who will eventually play D&D, perhaps Emma.
You know what? We're actually setting up a game.
It's gonna happen.
We already have a Discord chat. I'm gonna GM it.
Whoa.
It's sweet.
We have a
Private
group.
session.
Private session.
Yeah.
I'm not in it, but I know it's going to be sweet. Regardless, it kind of sends the wrong message. Like, this is up for some form of approval by like the masses rather than the people who have been effectively hurt, which is a problem we've seen with D&D for a while now, where they're like, well, we have to find the line, the balance between honoring one group and the next, which is what they mentioned in Tasha's, or the response to Tasha's, as opposed to, well, really what you should be doing is listening to the people who have come before you, done all of this work already, and perhaps iterate on that. So I don't know if I like it. Hold on. I don't know if I like it here. And I don't know if I like it. This is very piecemeal, you know? And I understand the need for small changes over time and how that can affect larger change. But something about it, honestly, is kind of feeling like rubbing it the wrong way. Because if they've been thinking about it this long, part of me is like, well, just release the whole notes on it. Just release the whole notes on it and we'll work. I know that's not realistic. But...
Yeah, the thing is, like, like, while I totally agree with thinking like that kind of thought also really works for a small publishing house, right? Wizards is like a giant company that has to answer to all of these executives. And I'm not defending them in any way, shape, or form. But, like, Unearthed Arcana, yes, that is open to feedback. But it's also on us to say, like, hey, we like this too, right? Because you're saying, your argument basically assumes that the feedback that they're going to listen to is only the negative feedback from the people who will push back against this, right? But there's also anyone who watches this video, anyone who is positively affected by these rules changes, who can also say, hey, Wizards, I thought this was really great. Or, hey, Wizards, there was this ancestry and culture thing, and they did this already. Right? I say that too. But I think I applaud Wizards for doing this only because, they have this, having now understood how the entire, like, process of creating a D&D book, like, what it looks like, right? With Candlekeep. Like, I was working on Candlekeep. I've been working on it since 2019. And it takes a really long time to put out a new D&D book. Now, if they hadn't thought about this, assuming that Wizards hadn't thought about this at all and they thought what they were doing was perfect, and this is like brand new thinking, chances are we won't see a new book with this or a new book where this might fit into it for a little while. Now, say they had been thinking about this. Say they had looked at a lot of the third-party stuff out there that had already done this, right? I think them putting this out is, again, a good first step. It's certainly not the end-all, be-all. It's certainly not the solution. But I think it's a great way for them to, through an official channel, and that's the thing, an official channel, show consumers, show the community that they are trying and that, like they said, moving forward in future D&D books, going to be making changes. And I think this is a far more effective way to do it than through like a Twitter statement, through like a Facebook post, through a social media ad. Like, we really have to think that, like, Wizards has to act like a large company, right? And they can't go and they can't just make these quick changes. You can't go and let's reprint all the players' handbooks and remove race. The Unearthed Arcana is a really good avenue for them to, on one end, experiment, but also communicate with their communities as to what they are doing. So that's kind of like, I don't disagree with you, Adam Ali, but I wanted to introduce that perspective, that line of thinking. Whereas, since producing official D&D content takes a very long time.
Absolutely, I think there's still room for Wizards to have released like a full kind of design document, right? Maybe the actual affecting change takes place over a long period of time, but it'd be a good way to state, this is our current statement of intent. And here's how it's going to look, ideally,
like a design
sorted.
roadmap.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that a bit more, because
I think they think that they did do that with that statement they put out last year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and we discussed this the last time, because this is the same group.
Yeah.
Hi, we're back again. It really wasn't enough. It didn't have enough detail, and it kind of left too much to the imagination. This is a lot better. I will argue that. Read something different. But anyway, this is better. It's absolutely better. I just have a hard time celebrating something that's better when we can have like more good. And to be fair, this is like, there's a difference between saying I am glad for this change, which I am, and I am excited for this change. So there's a bunch of people on Twitter right now, a bunch of people from marginalized genders and races and sexualities saying, I am glad for this change. It doesn't necessarily mean they're celebrating it right now, because a lot of us have been burned before in some ways. We've been promised big changes and it's come out to very little. So there's a little bit of a back and forth in my brain. I'm of very two minds when it comes to stuff like this.
Yeah, and
as for the lineage,
I think you should be. I think this is a stronger statement of intent. It's certainly not a permanent one, but I think the publishing like a design roadmap, I don't know if that's something that they ever thought about or something they can even do. We don't know how like they really function behind the scenes, or if Hasbro executives want to release like, hey, this is how we're going to make our next generation of products before they put it out. Right? I think they certainly want to control, what people know about their products, right? Because I mean, I'm sure they're working on 6th edition D&D right now. But if they put that out there, I know that I'm sure they don't want people to like scoop what they're doing or anything like that. Because I don't know if that ultimately affects, how many copies of 6th edition they're going to sell. I think one thing that I think would be neat, but I know wouldn't work in the way they used to do it, was like a rules encyclopedia. They did that for like AD&D. There's a big rules tome, but the rules of AD&D are completely different and a lot more dense than the rules of 5th edition. It's possible that they could go and release like a free PDF, and it is like a rules tome of like everything. You could say it's like, I don't know, like a new player's guide, and call it a new player's guide, and put it out there for free. And it's like a companion to your player's handbook. Or it's a companion to your Dungeon Master's Guide. It has a cool flow chart of how combat works. It has like a really easy to understand flow chart for making your character, kind of like the D&D 2021 annual that Dungeons and Agents happens to be a part of. You can buy it at amazon.co.uk. But like, I think Wizards also is thinking about like how they would even like profit off of that. I think like a guide to new players or a guide to new adventurers might actually be a cool product, and it could include these amendments. But
I would personally like a new player's handbook, honestly. Like they don't have to make a 5.5e or you move to 6e, but an updated player's handbook would be appreciated because they updated the starter set. They made the essential kit.
So what would you want in an updated player's handbook?
I would want. I'm not overly fond of the way Wizards has been releasing this extra content in the form of like Tasha's Guide to Everything, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Volo's Guide to Monsters. What I'm sure this will be, like I said before, classified as like Rudolf von Richten's Guide to the Undead or like to Gothic Lineages or something like that in 2021 or 2022. I kind of wish a lot of these things, along with more information that's in Tasha's now, like how to have a good session 0, how to talk about safety with your players. I wish all of that could be condensed in a new kind of revised player's handbook, because the current player's handbook is from 2014 and parts of it feel like they're from 2014. They don't feel like they're from 2020 or 2021. And me personally, I would probably pay for a new player's handbook.
Player's handbook 2?
D&D. Yeah, player's handbook 2.
Like in the tradition of like 4th edition and 3rd edition?
Yeah, or they could call it like, I don't know, the players, I don't know, they could come up with some fancy name for it, like the player's tomb of knowledge or something like that, or who
like
knows?
A new player's guide, or like you could literally pick a character in D&D and make it like this person's guide to adventuring.
I mean, so much has happened since 2014 when the player's handbook came up, and so much has happened since D&D Next, which is the playtest material for 5th. And a lot of this Unearthed Arcana stuff, particularly the changes to race, it's playing catch up. Wizards is playing catch up to what the community has been talking about over the last couple of years. Wizards is revising their course after what happened last year with all the talk about, improving the roots of race in D&D, and they're playing catch up with competitors like the third-party stuff, Ancestry and Culture, and with Paizo, with Pathfinder 2nd edition. And I guarantee you, when Pathfinder 2nd edition came out, they paid attention to the changes there. And then when all the kerfuffle happened last year, they've also been paying attention to what the players and the people on Twitter have been saying. So I don't think these rules have really been in the pipeline for that long, which is why they feel like, it's safe to toss it out in Unearthed Arcana. Let's see if we can please the Twitterati and then pump out a book in 2021. Like I feel like that's how they
I think they're right now triaging all of the discourse right now. They're like, okay, we have to deal with this race thing. Okay, we have to deal with certain creators. Okay, so we have to deal with, like game mechanics, things like that.
Candlekeep Mysteries could very well be a response to like the stuff that you guys have done with Unbreakable, like and all the little books coming out on DM's Guild, which are mini micro adventures, which are infinitely more usable than these long campaigns that they've previously been put out. So you guys decided the destiny of D&D.
So when I got brought on to Unbreakable Volume 1, I actually pitched an idea that they all take place around a central setting, a central city. It was it was the idea that I posted on their Discord. And I was like, hey, it should be this. And it ended up not going that way. And then Wizards did Candlekeep, which is exactly the idea that I originally pitched for Unbreakable. But I think Candlekeep is like a cool step forward. But I think Candlekeep has to sell well. People have to really like Candlekeep to show the executives at Hasbro and at Wizards that more content like this has to happen. That's the thing. Like, Wizards can do these things, but if people don't vibe with it or people don't act with their dollars, then Wizards is less inclined to do them, right? Because they have to balance making money and social good, right? And while we want both, while I think both are really great for a company, like, I know that making money is more important to large companies like Hasbro.
I think it's good clarification to make sure that we're mentioning it. It makes more money than, your average other release is a big thing.
Yes.
Right? Or it makes a comparable amount, I'd say. Because if it does make a comparable amount, then this doesn't just seem like worth the risk. It seems like, this is like a new area in which we are not monetizing.
Yeah.
So let's monetize it.
And then it encourages them to do Candlekeep too, right?
Yeah.
Because Candlekeep is literally, there are 17 adventures there that all start from a book in that library. So
which is a campaign idea I had too, and now it's manifested in I imagined a gigantic magical library with books that are like portals into adventuring worlds, and boom, there we go.
Turn to Candlekeep.
Yeah.
And so
the thing is they've done this adventure anthology thing before with Tales from the Yawning Portal and Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which I both like, but those are old D&D adventures designed to like appeal to folks familiar with like Tomb of Horrors and the Saltmarsh series. This is that same format, but hey, we're going to reach out to creators and prolific folks in the community, particularly diverse creators, to produce these micro adventures for us. So, I mean, I think that's great and a step forward, and I hope it sells just as well as like Tales from Yawning Portal.
Yep.
I think the fact that there's this huge social media, like positive social media response to this. I mean, there are people who are like, well, dungeons don't need to be wheelchair accessible. Those people are stupid, first of all, or silly. They why can't a dungeon have ramps? I think that's a whole other stream we can do on our own.
Well, okay. Yes. I really want to mention that a lot of the ways you drag rocks around to build a dungeon wall involve ramps to begin with.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense. Like, not even from an accessibility perspective, but from a design perspective. I'm very upset about the ramp thing.
Ramps just make more sense. Also, you can do more traps with ramps. I think ramps are cool.
You can have the Indiana Jones thing where, like, suddenly the ramp... Yeah, like... Right? Come on.
And I think the fact that ramps are inherently kind of cool and there's a lot of possibilities for gameplay involving ramps. I think a lot of those folks complaining might agree with that statement. It's the whole accessibility thing that grinds their gears.
Yeah. It's being added.
It's being added. If you were just like, this dungeon is all ramps, or even if like, hey, this is a very specific one-shot where you happen to play characters in wheelchairs. And like, I think a lot of people could get behind that, but the whole accessibility word pisses off a certain legion of folks.
I get that. The thing that's important to remember is that Candlekeep is featuring one dungeon with ramps. That's it. It is not featuring accessibility rules. It's not featuring anything like Mustang Arts combat wheelchair. Nothing like that has been added. There is no additional accessibility except for one dungeon.
Yeah,
and I think
they literally when they came to us, they were like, it has to be about a book. It has to be set in Candlekeep. It has to start in Candlekeep. The adventure isn't set in Candlekeep. Mine definitely is not. But they were like, go nuts, pitch, and then we'll work on it. So like there was no guide to what our adventures had to be.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about this. Like, as someone who's not really involved with any of like D&D and where the fan base, like what is why are people upset about? Like, I don't understand.
Because it's progressive, and they feel as if it's encroaching on their territory, and it's the same reason why people are upset with race as an idea kind of changing in this long-term fantasy game.
It's people who don't want, it's the kind of people who say, like, I don't want your politics in my game.
Yeah,
it's those people.
It's a specific segment of the fan base.
It's the same thing we were talking about in last stream. So last week we did an episode on cultural consulting with Kiana, and we talked a bit about gatekeeping. It's the same thing. It really just comes down to gatekeeping for the sake of gatekeeping is what this is coming from, which is harmful for various reasons. And confusing. But I think
to me,
it's like the people who are like, I don't want to be told that my dungeons have to be accessible. It's those.
I mean, and it's not just D&D. When I first met Steve, going back to when we were talking about our first conversation, we talked about Pathfinder 2nd Edition when goblins became a core playable race, and there was a whole segment of the Pathfinder fan that was like, "No goblins, no! When I see goblins, I kill them. No, this is weird. It messes up the lore. I don't want to. Goblins are an evil race. It really. I mean, we weren't even talking about accessibility. We're talking about goblins.
Yeah.
And boom! Suddenly, it's simmered down since then, but goblins were kind of the most popular icon of Pathfinder, but suddenly, because they became a core ancestry, not race, in the 2nd edition, suddenly this vocal fan base exploded.
The thing is, like, they're a core ancestry in Starfinder.
Yeah,
and they're honestly.
But Starfinder's in the future, so
yeah, but it's set in the same world. But it's in the same world.
Yeah, it's set in the same world. Yeah.
Honestly, the way they included goblins in Starfinder is really smart. I thought it was really cool. They're literally.
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No.
Go ahead, Agatha. It's fine.
Oh, I'm still like kind of trying to wrap my head around this. So it's basically a sense of ownership, I guess. Like you feel like you own, or like it should be for you, and this product was already for you. Because I'm also thinking about, like, for example, like people who really care about like nostalgia and things like that. So a lot of people in the OSR community, like, because I was recently playing Morgborg. Is that how you say it? I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
And in there, like, one of the major things that you can start with is a wagon for carrying your things, and then also, to go around in the wagon, you also need ramps. But like, I just feel like these are kind of things that show up in other spaces that nobody seems to be making an uproar about. So I
think it is in part because a big part of that, January 12th, when Candlekeep got announced, a big part of the online discussions were like, hey, one of the dungeons is wheelchair accessible. I think it's when they said that instead of, hey, one of these dungeons is just all ramps. And I think people were really upset because it stirred up this conversation about the combat wheelchair, and not about like ownership over who created it, but conversations about why it has to exist. And there are segments of the gaming community who are just like, this thing is dope. Like, I love it. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's a great way of allowing people to play the characters that they want to play and to be seen as they want to be seen in the game. I am of the philosophy that the more tools, the better, right? Because it allows you to create more diverse characters. And I think that's awesome, because that means your stories get better. But then there are the people who will say, like, oh, the combat wheelchair is unnecessary because there's magic and magic would heal you. And I mean, there are so many flaws to that argument. But there's also a whole segment that just sees accessibility, diversity, the fact that you are trying to reduce Orientalism in future releases, or change, don't stop calling the Vistani, the slurs in the text. They see that as basically they don't want
real world politics, social justice, and we get into the whole, gamer gate, whatever, tabletop gate, that kind of thing where it's like, I don't want to touch social justice, or it's just like, grow up. This doesn't matter. Like,
yeah.
And yeah,
this is a wider faction around the world in general.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is that, well, one, the fear of being corrected. So going into a space of being told, like, no, that's not right, don't do that. And the sense of guilt or feeling like you've done something wrong. No one likes to feel that. And some people react with anger even at the idea, like, I don't want to be corrected. So don't let that stuff come into my space in the first place. Like, I think that happens a lot, not just in gaming. And I can't really wrap my head around why some of this stuff is being like outright rejected, like you were saying, Agatha. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense, but I also don't think, like, what's the big deal? But like, it would only benefit someone like me. It wouldn't really.
I think something. So let me give you, because I love analogies, but let me give a quick analogy. I really like the color red, and Daniel really likes the color blue, right? For a long time, this company, Blizzards of the Most has consistently made games that are all red, just all red, right? And I have loved that because it's exactly what I want, because I really like the color red. I'm red-green colorblind. This was a bad decision on my part, but I really like the color red. Blizzards has done their very best to make their game specifically for people like me. Then they announced, okay, so this next game, this next bit about our game, this next expansion is going to feature a lot of the color blue. And to many people, especially many people who like the color blue or who like colors outside of those two, this is actually really exciting, because this means that we're being seen, we're being heard, we're being understood, we're being invited to play at the table officially for the first time, right? This isn't just tossing cookies at our way. This is saying, hey, the door is open now. Sure, it may not be perfect. It may be more purple than blue, but it's the first sign, and we can work with that. But to many people who love the color red, what's really terrifying is that Blizzards means that Blizzards is going to make less red content.
Blizzards.
Sorry. But Blizzards is going to make less red content. And maybe it'll stop making red content altogether. This game isn't for me anymore. It's for the blue folk. I, who like red, I'm going to lose my connection to that because they're going to stop making content from it. It's this irrational fear of losing something that has not been lost, which comes about from losing a small amount of privilege. And we see that a lot when it comes to privileged folk, either seeing other people gain privilege or possibly losing privilege. The thought is, I shall lose everything, I will be at the bottom of the heap. And that is never the ideal. We're never going to do that. But it's such a shock to the system because they're used to it one way their entire life, that the sheer absence of the color red is enough for them to see red. So
I have a small maybe add-on or potentially a tension with that analogy.
Sure.
And it's that I think it misses the fact that in your analogy, the world those people live in, the entire world has been geared towards people who like red.
Mm-hmm.
And for the people who like blue, it's not a like or a preference for them. It's their identity. And I think I don't particularly jive with the idea that they're kind of equivalent, their preferences. For one of them, it's identity and representation. And that, in my opinion, personally, I think has more weight than preferences, especially within the frame of a world built around that.
When it comes specifically to the concepts of race and accessibility, I agree with you. But the reason why I went so generic there was because to talk about Pathfinder's goblin situation.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a lot more, about relatively, simple tension than something as complex as decades or centuries long racism.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I also think that the goblin thing, and Agatha, this kind of goes back to some of the confusion I think you have, which I want to label directly. But I think that idea of I want goblins to be things that I can kill and colonize. I think it's a deep-seated want to have racism and colonialism as part of my identity. And I want to continue enjoying the benefits of having that as part of my
privilege
story.
I think
my privilege.
Mahar has the perfect analogy actually in the chat. Mahar says, well, it's like straight people who think their marriages are lessened by legalizing same-sex marriage.
That is a very...
I think that's the best analogy.
I think there's a... Sorry, Agatha, go ahead.
No.
I mean, I was just going to say that this is part of a broader conversation. When you get very deep. There is a kind of a fear of change here, or an uncomfort with things evolving and changing to match criteria that are, I guess, different, or perhaps hard to understand when compared to the traditions that you grew up with. And we see this in the world. I mean, I work in journalism. This is all that's happening in politics in the U.S. And we see it in pop culture as well. This is what's been happening in D&D. This is what's been happening in comic books, in video games in general. Like, you think about, stuff like, The Last of Us Part 2 and all the controversies there. Like, you see all of these things happening, and ultimately what it gets down to is, that feeling of, okay, this property is evolving in a way that I am not used to. And very often the gut reaction is to kind of lash out or defend the property, or to say, go back to the way that I'm accustomed to. You don't need to change. Very rarely is the reaction to sit and think about why this property is changing. What are the benefits of it changing? And, who else can it benefit besides yourself? And that's a very kind of deep dissection of it, but I think that's at the core of a lot of this.
Yeah, and I'm not going to comment on how this may overlap with people's political views in real life, and how those things, affect each other. But it does seem to me, from the little bit I've read and also this discussion, that it's, for a lot of people, it's the ultimate power fantasy, which is to buy into a lot of stereotypes, I guess, like being able-bodied, and like being able to go out and kill with impunity, or just have power over other people, other living things, like, and specifically in the form of the power over life and death, right? Like, that's a lot of power, and that is a fantasy that, for, I guess, for some people, or a lot of people, that could feel like it's being encroached on, when it's like, oh, okay, so now I can't just be this like apex hunter who can go and do what I want, because I am this, like, because I am so powerful, and because I this position gives me the right to do what I want. And so I feel like, if part of that is also just the feeling of like, oh, you're telling me that I can't have my ultimate power fantasy now. Oh, I have to make space for other people within my own fantasy like world. That, like, I feel like that is what a lot of it is as well, is that people, I mean, like, it's the fantasy that they want, like their
they might not realize that they have that, though. They might kind of inherently or like subtly have it, just because they've grown up in this culture of where that power fantasy is encouraged. So when you point out that essentially what you have is a power fantasy, you want to kill goblins without repercussions, they will then be like, no, I don't, like, I'm not a racist, like, that's where you get into that very kind of just,
it's like the people who say, like, I'm not a racist, but Daniel and Steve have no reason to complain about Oriental adventures. It's like,
are they even Asian?
Are they even? Yeah, is Steve?
I still can't believe
is
that.
Steve even Asian? I brought my Asian wife here to validate everything that I say.
Oh no, let's not get into it. No, let's get into it.
Yeah, remember that? Remember that?
I remember.
Hold back.
But here's a thing with. I mean, before we get like too off track. With this, it's, Agatha, I think what you say is like super valid. Like, people don't want others encroaching on their fantasy, but this is also like, there are like two fantasies at play here, right? There's the fantasy that you have when you play your game with your players, and what you do at that table, unless it's like streamed or whatnot, what you do at that table has no effect on anybody else. But then there's also the fantasy that you have of the product, and who's writing that product, and who people are writing the product for. Right? And now I think a lot of these people are feeling like D&D isn't being written for them. It's not being written for you, white person, or you, person who does not use a wheelchair. Right? D&D isn't being written for you. I think what people need to realize is that D&D should be for everyone. And D&D, I won't say has always, because D&D has not always been for everyone, right? But Wizards of the Coast is doing their best to try to make D&D for everyone. And there are people who are upset that D&D is in the mainstream now. People are upset that they can go to a bookstore and see D&D, right? People are upset.
Hasn't it been like that for decades?
It's
though?
been like that for very long.
But this is the other gatekeeping side of it, where it's like 5th edition sucks. It's too simple. It's too mainstream. Critical Role is too in everybody's face.
Right,
That's all anybody wants when they play D&D is Critical Role. I miss 3.5, or I miss AD&D, or I miss when
But you don't hear people say, "Oh, the OSR is too simple,"
because that's what they grew up with. That's nostalgia talking. It's also important to remember, as much as D&D has been in bookstores for a while now, this is the first, I think, edition where they start getting bookends in major retailers. So like it's in the end of a shelf being aggressively promoted now. Whereas
I think it's been like that for a long time, because I remember being like 10 and going to Chapters and seeing like a whole shelf of D&D books.
Chapters Indigo.
Chapters
Oh
Indigo.
my God, Chapters.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Heather.
I will not talk to you, Heather.
Sorry for the
Heather
non-Canadians. So for the non-Canadians,
Heather's picks.
Heather's picks. Chapters and Indigo merged, but they are basically the Barnes and Noble. Oh, Chapters, Indigo, Barnes and Noble. Chapters Indigo is basically the Barnes and Noble of Canada, and the owner, her name is Heather, and they have these stickers, and it's like Heather's pick. And
Yep.
they put them on everything.
It's our
Also,
own Oprah book club. It's Heather's
someone
pick.
mentioned, yes, the Chapters
Coles.
Indigo family also includes Coles.
I forgot about
we
Coles.
don't talk about
Coles.
Coles.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Coles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
valid.
But yeah.
Valid.
I respect
Coles,
that.
you are valid.
But,
We are
like,
here to support you.
Yeah.
If you shopped at Kohl's, you're valid. That's what I wanted to say.
I mean, if you go
Coles is sitting there
downtown-
being like, we were about to sponsor Asians Represent.
Kohl's was the only bookstore in my town growing up, so
Yeah, come back, Coles. Sponsor
Yeah.
us. Also, bubble tea shops sponsor us.
Bubble tea shops.
yeah.
For Torontonians who live in the Path, Coles is like their most accessible option. For people like me who live in Pickering, you've got maybe a Coles in a mall, and then way over there you got a Chapters.
Yeah, by like a movie theater.
Yeah,
And you don't even know what an Indigo is. Those don't exist out here.
that's a real Toronto thing. That's a real
Yeah.
Toronto thing.
I also wanted to kind of go way back, like almost like half an hour ago. But as we were reading through that kind of change that was happening, where Wizards was saying, basically, we have this intention to replace race. We're going to use different words. We're going to change the mechanics to better suit certain goals. Agatha and Emma, did you have any kind of takeaways from that, or any thoughts or feelings on that? Because I know D&D for you is kind of like new grounds. So did that evoke anything for you?
When I read it, it kind of sounded like not a whole lot was changing, other than requesting a change in perspective. And
Very fair take. Yeah.
It's very fair take.
Because they're like, just take all of those numbers and just slap them on anyways, but don't call it the same thing. I was like,
I think they
Alright.
basically
What Tasha's got to everything.
They just reiterated what they said in Tasha's. And I think I think
Yeah.
the important thing here is they said that moving forward, this is going to be the format of the book. And then in this
Yeah.
Unearthed Arcana, if we want to move into the different lineages, they are showing what their like new format is. And there are things I really like about this that are on display here. So it's like
Before we do, though, I do want to mention that one of those terms that specifically uses the term species, and our very own Steve, hi Steve, has a lovely tweet thread about it. It is not too long, and I'm going to just link it in the chat.
5-minute read.
We may not necessarily have time, but it's still like, it's a good thread that covers a lot of issues with the term species.
I think that's I think that's something we should cover in like a stream of its own. Talking about race, ancestry, species, and like the bio-essentialism that's in D&D. I mean, we as like, and I'll say this, and then producer Daniel's gonna say like, yo, we need to move on. I'll say this, like, we as human beings crave structure, right? We need structure. We need rules, some more than others. There has to be something to structure D&D. So I think there is inevitably going to be some form of bio-essentialism, but I think what Wizards is doing and what the community wants Wizards to do is be very purposeful about their bio-essentialism. So, like, yes, if you are a Dampier, you can see in the dark, and that's the kind of bio-essentialism we want. Right? You can
Agatha weigh in.
Agatha weigh in. Like, go for it.
100% weigh in.
Right? Because like, what are we gonna do? Like, because like D&D can go that way, or, and I'm not opposed to this either. They go, here are a list of traits you could pick. Pick whatever you want. Pick 5. Right? You can go that way, and maybe that's what 6th edition is going to be. But again, like I said earlier, we still have to work within the structures of 5th edition. So any improvements they have to make still have to function within the ecosystem that they've already built. Like this is, as much as we want this is not a burn it all down and build it back up again. Because as much as I want that, that's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you still have to work within the structures of 5th edition. So yes, the changes are not as pronounced as we want, and there is certainly a lot more that they can do, right? But we still have to realize that.
Yeah. And like, that's where some of it will always, I think, seem strange or kind of bother me, is that they can't completely get rid of the word race because it's so ingrained into their structures.
Yeah.
And so for this statement, I liked how they said, like, alignment is a choice. Like, cool. And then they immediately go on to say that race is like a series of physical traits. I'm like,
yeah.
And then that it refers to like a suite of game features. But like, you got to explain that better, I think.
I definitely think that they need to explain that better, because they can't get rid of race in 5th edition. They can get rid of race in D&D moving forward, but not right now.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're a writer for D&D and when you work for them, they give you a style guide and all the approved terms that you're supposed to use to make sure that what you write is compatible with everything else. And race is going to stay in 5th edition until they do 6th edition, and I'm sure they'll make it ancestry or something better. I can't think of anything other than ancestry.
Ancestry and Culture is like by Arcanist Press. It's very good.
It is, but again, like, you have to think, like, do you think Wizards would say, go use this supplement that is not by us, that we don't profit from?
Oh, no, absolutely.
Or do you say, like, hey, download our Unearthed Arcana and it will allow you to make these subtle changes within the products that you've already purchased, right? Like, and I edited. Pam and I were both editors on Ancestry and Culture, and while I think it is a fantastic product, like, I would not have signed on to do it if I didn't think it was a fantastic product, I do not think Wizards of the Coast would go and say use this. Simply
They would
because
say, go find other things on the DM's Guild, but they would not specifically
they will not say
mention
that because Ancestry and Culture is not on the DM's Guild.
It's not. Oh, I thought it was.
I'm pretty sure it's on drive-through.
Ooh, interesting.
But I would have checked and confirmed.
It's definitely on drive-through. It's definitely on drive-through. I don't think it's on DMs.
Also because DM's Guild takes 50%.
Ooh. Yeah.
So is the term
It is on DM's
supposed-
Guild.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
It is.
Good.
I did want to say, just before when when I was cracking up, actually, I find everything that you said just now, Daniel. I actually think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like you have the burden of legacy. Yeah, you're working with like an existing property. You just like there's some things that you probably can't change so thoroughly without it basically not being the same product anymore. So I understand that, but I just thought it was really funny the way that you phrase it. And I'm just thinking about all these meetings where it's like, we just gotta focus our bio-essentialism.
Just write on the whiteboard.
Let's streamline our bio-essentialism. Yeah,
we gotta ask ourselves. Okay, we gotta ask ourselves.
Guarantee that word does not come up in the meeting.
What is the bio-essentialism that they want?
What is the good? What is the good bio-essentialism? Right?
What is the bio-essentialism that they need?
So really, I think like what they're doing is like, I really think they're just saying, okay, like we have the burden of race and we have to deal with it for the foreseeable future, right? For 5th edition's product to lifespan, right? What do we do with it? And I think this is them trying. Is it a great attempt? Nah. but it is an attempt. And I think we should acknowledge effort, because that's all we can do as human beings. I think we have to try, right? We have to, we have to realize that, like, a member of our community, Mackenzie, works for Wizards now, right? We have to realize that that's fantastic. And we have to realize that there are people who are trying to make an active effort to make D&D better, but they have to work within this existing structure, and that is the game system, and the existing structure that is this corporation called Hasbro.
Like the government of the United States. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, no, you're right.
Let's move to the next topic.
Yeah, we don't want politics in this stream. Yeah.
Oh, we don't want politics.
I think it's a little too late for that.
I need to ask then, is lineage a new term they're introducing here, or does it have specific meaning? So how is this not just like, instead of race, we're saying lineage, because it's essentially the same thing as ancestry?
Well, I think the thing
they'll probably use lineage in 6th edition.
They will probably use lineage there, but I think with this one, mechanically, you could turn into one of these things. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be something you start with. Which is, I think, the way they justified using this other word.
So another piece here is that race in like day-to-day life means something ambiguous and tumultuous in a lot of like circles, rightfully so. So using it evokes a lot of emotion in players, and then when you start putting rules down to it, you really start blurring the lines between like what the interpretation of the designers are trying to say versus what the interpretation of any person who just like uses that word colloquially means. So moving away from it, from a game design perspective, is quite wise, because it allows you to say certain things about how you want your game to run, and of course how you picture bio-essentialism and whatnot, without actually getting into the dirty, muddy waters of what race actually means to person. Yeah, and that unfortunately is kind of the world we live in, so we have to be careful about that.
Yeah. And I will acknowledge that I'm pretty sure that originally it was like the word race here was used as the way we would say human race, like not social race and socially recognized and experienced race. Like they were saying like human race and then the other ones.
Yeah, exactly. But then other people will interpret it differently, and it's kind of taken on something different and evolved into something new.
And then you get a new term like sub-race, and you're like, wait a minute, would you like to explain more to me what you mean by a sub-race?
No.
So, and the answer is no, you don't want to.
You don't want to get into that.
Which is again another reason why you want to move away from that terminology.
Yeah. Have you ever had sub-race brought into a real life conversation, not about D&D? Because I have.
Really?
I don't care for that.
Oh, I have, but only when investigating alt-right message boards for work.
Yeah.
I've seen it, a lot of it referenced to when anti-Semitism happens. Yeah. I don't really want to get into it though, because I feel like
we're going to leave that. But anyways, I want to move into like the good. So here's why. So before all of you were in the Zoom call, I was talking to Agatha, and I said, Agatha, I think there are things here that you're going to like. And
this is how you pitched it to me.
This is how I pitched it. and it wasn't the changes to racial traits. It was actually in the Dampier and the Reborn that I think
tell me about
that.
this.
I think have elements that Agatha will like. No, having been playing games with Agatha for a couple years now, like I know what Agatha likes. So the Dampier, I think there are a couple really cool things about it. And if this is how they move on with race, lineage, ancestry in the future, I think this is a great sign. What I love is that they front-loaded all of this with narrative stuff. They were literally like, oh, you're a Dampier. You are like, you have this thirst. But what is this thirst? And you could literally come up with a thirst. And I love how one of the hungers, color.
Oh yeah, it's like
right, because it's like Urban
Shadows.
Shadows.
A Monster Hearts
or Monster Hearts, right? So I when I was reading this, I was like, it's like, oh, hungers. If you roll a 6, it's a color from one's appearance. But in my brain, I was like, oh, it's just color. And I imagined this like Dampier Lord walking down the street and like running his hands along like the stalls as he walks through the market and draining color out of everything, and everything becomes like monochrome. And I was like, oh, what a really cool adventure this would be. If all of a
God, it
sudden
makes me think
everything
of
was
Bunnicula.
grayscale.
I mean,
Bunnicula.
so, like,
He drains the juice
really
from
cool.
the carrots.
It's really cool. A color from one's appearance does bring about a certain level of tension, especially if you are from a darker persuasion. I know a lot of brown and black folks, myself included, are like looking at that and thinking, I don't think they meant it like this.
See, because
I
that's
don't
why
think they meant it like
yeah,
this.
because in my head I went straight to like colors, like, oh, this like the pipes in my home are red, like right.
I also thought of race, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
see, I didn't think about that. But if they just said color, that'd be really neat. Amendment.
It would. It would.
But there are, but what I mean, obviously there are flaws, and I'm not saying it's perfect. But what I think is again really neat is that they have given you choice. You no longer have to drain blood. Because what if you feel faint at the sight of blood and you don't want blood in your narrative? But you also think it's really neat to play a character who is cursed by some sort of hunger. So what is this hunger? Psychic energy, dreams. I think that's really neat, and I think they're setting an example for players to be creative with this. Same thing with the origins, right? It depends on how you like your vampires. Is it a parasite? Is it like the Guillermo del Toro and books, the Strain? Is it like the Strain? Right? Are they parasites? Was this passed on to you from another creature? Did you get this through tainted food? Are you the result of an experiment
Ooh, yeah, this is really like Monster Hearts. Eh?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's like so it's getting you to really think from a narrative perspective about your character, and then they go into traits. Heck, like level 3 character, constant spider climb. That's pretty dope.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. But I think what's interesting is that, like, the bite. Obviously, when you think of Dampier, you think of a bite, and it's something that they consume, right? But they've made it so that you can consume things that are, I mean, this is a combat ability, but you hunger for something different, right? So if I hunger for dreams and I bite someone, maybe I'm taking memories from them. Maybe I'm taking the potential for dreams. So I think,
or at least you're not switching, because they talk about it a little as soon as you feed off of the thing that you hunger for, it might switch you into like an uncontrollable state. And so this way you can also say, like, if you bite someone, it's not necessarily like that hunger for blood and you're done for. Yeah. So it gives you some options.
And I noticed
third level spider climb is going to be a game changer.
That's a game changer, right?
I wonder if that might get nerfed. I feel like that might get nerfed.
I was reading this and I was like, damn, this is powerful. And you heal with your bite. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, Adam and Lee, what do you think?
This is very World of Darkness. Like, I mean, I'm thinking of the next one, right? Darkness. Like the Hexblade reminds me of Changeling for some reason. But sorry, go ahead, Adam.
No, like you're right. There's definitely some like elements of World of Darkness in here. You can definitely see it inspired some of this, and I kind of like bits of it. So this is like my second thing with this whole lineages thing. I don't like how they introduce these lineages first as things you can turn into, rather than showing how these could work with things you're born as. By rule. Also, I get really, so this is one of those things, like if you are a Triton and you get turned into a Dampier, your physical traits, according to the rules played out,
lose them.
You lose them and are replaced by these. And sometimes that's okay. Like I understand, I guess maybe something about physiology would make a breath weapon for a Dragonborn somewhat impossible or something, but I find it very hard to wrap my brain around that if you are a species, for example, that can breathe underwater, that suddenly you can no longer breathe underwater.
I think
there's something cool about that. But
again, I think this is them like struggling with what they already have, right? Yeah. Because if you got all of this, like say the Dampier, for example, if you got all of this plus what you already had, it results in really overpowered characters.
Oh yeah,
but then if you say like, okay, these are things that you can become, and you nerf their abilities, then if players just want to make a Dampier character from scratch, it is underpowered compared to other ones.
I think for the case of these specific 3 lineages, I think I would have preferred them as add-ons. So no matter if you are like starting from scratch, you pick a different lineage, you pick a different race, and then you just tack on. You still are a bit overpowered compared to your fellow players, but you can still separate it by level, so it's not that dramatic.
If you
there's ways
separating players by level is also a tough thing to do at the table, and a tough thing also to say to a player who maybe has never played D&D before.
Separate the skills, but like
the abilities. Yeah. I agree with that.
Like you would for a normal species. Like I feel these specifically might have worked better as small add-ons than whole lineages by themselves. But I see what they did here. They kind of want to like dip our toes into this. So they don't want to start off with like making a goblin lineage or making one of the players' handbook.
Well, they specifically picked things that are like that could happen to anyone, right? Yeah. Like they're picking like literary curses, like I am turned into half vampire, or I have become this hex blood, or like reborn. I died. I think honestly, I think of all of these, the reborn is so interesting because faded memories. I know, like, if we had this in the game, I know Agatha would be just like using this ability all the time.
No, like, see, this is once again World of Darkness. I think like Promethean, pretty much. But isn't there like a Pathfinder race that is basically the reborn?
There's also the reborn specifically for World of Darkness. The not World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, the Mummy, especially Mummy Second Edition. There's huge elements of like the faded memories. Anyway, I'm getting back into World of Darkness. No one wants that. I love the reborn.
On the contrary,
I'm here for it. Yeah, I don't know who is this no one that you're referring.
Yeah, because we're all listening.
Yeah, I know.
All I'm gonna say is that if Agatha loves the reborn, clearly Agatha and I might be the same person.
There's a lot.
Do you know that we are the same person?
Oh,
no wonder I can never remember who you are.
Yeah.
You brought it back.
No!
You brought that back. Oh shit.
Yeah. Well, I did it to myself. It's fine when I do it to me. That's fine.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Is it really?
But yeah, there's a lot to resonate with the
sorry,
reborn. Yeah. No, I just wanted to bring up one thing because I saw that I'm like, the line, rather than sleeping, reborn regularly sit and dwell on the past. I'm like, that's gonna like hit a lot of notes for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, it's like, do you want to have a lost memory? Do you want to have a moment to roll for a memory? And then you have this like little role play moment while everybody's asleep. And I was like, cool. Oh, this is cool, right?
Yeah,
this
is very me. You're right, Daniel.
I know you. Unlike Adam Ali, I know you.
That's me. Oh.
So the reason why the reborn really vibed with me was because there are many different ways that I can do it, right? I've been rereading a lot of comics lately, and I've been rereading all of the BPRD stuff. And I'm on the story. First of all, are all of you familiar with the BPRD?
Mm-hmm.
Please define.
That's the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense. It is the Mignola-verse. It is the expanded Hellboy universe.
Hellboy is just a tiefling.
Hellboy's just a tiefling with a big rock hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love those comics.
They're so great. Lobster Johnson. But the BPRD basically have all these enhanced agents, and one of them, his name is Abe Sapien. He's a fishman. And in the BPRD standalone comics, he actually begins to slowly kind of learn about his real origins. Because in the story, he was found in this tank, and he had been in stasis, and he doesn't know anything about his past. And now he's having all these memories. He's being exposed to the supernatural in ways that are actually triggering his early memories. And the reborn was instantly that for me. So I didn't even think about, like, zombie. I was like, fish person. Right? What about a character who was like, I woke up and this is me. And slowly over time, you're remembering that, no, I was once this, and I got transformed into this. I was reborn as something different through an experiment. I think it's just, there's a lot that you could do here.
There's total elements of Frankenstein's monster in here too.
That too, and I'm sure that's what they were going for. That was
yeah,
their thing. 100%.
It's not my first thought. My first thought was like, oh, this is great to be a survivor of some accident that you shouldn't have survived. I mean, like one of those people walking around with amnesia, but turns out, no, you died. Like I have so many thoughts about this one. I'm like, this is what I want to play.
Like another character of the BPRD Ben Daimyo who gets killed by a jaguar, and he wakes up after being dead for like several days, and it's just like, I have this entity that lives inside me. So cool.
And the idea of being, like, for the Reborn, the idea of being a single entity that's cobbled together from other things, like, that's a big way for people to explore that, like, being more than one thing and a combination of complex categories.
Their diaspora.
Oh
yeah,
Yeah, I feel that.
You know who this could really work for? Halo from Young Justice. No one here's watched Young Justice.
I don't know what you're
I should have watched Young Justice.
I watched Young Justice. I watched Young Justice a while ago.
Millisecond of silence.
Hold up. I know who Halo is from.
Yeah.
From the Outsiders comic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Halo's great, but like, I mean, I have some tension with them, but I do like
this is my first time seeing Halo's design for Young Justice. That is interesting.
Yeah,
right. That is an interesting change.
So, like,
Season 3.
the person who Halo was died, right? And her body is what a mother box latched onto and formed a new personality out of. But they still had memories of their previous self. So, like, there's some really cool stuff going on there. But, like, a Reborn storyline goes perfectly well with it. There's, like, a lot of options for this. I think it's probably the most open out of the three lineages.
This is the most different of. This is so different from anything else they've ever put out. Sorry, I'm super distracted because you said Young Justice, and I instant flashbacks to like just absolutely loving Aqualad.
Oh hell yeah!
Because Aqualad's design in Young Justice with the weapons and the tattoos, fuck yeah. Sorry.
I mean, he's now Aquaman.
Oh, see, I just watched it when it was like originally on TV. I know that they've done more with it, and I haven't. Spoilers.
Wow, yeah, spoiler alert.
It came out a year ago.
You heard it here first.
Oh, wow, a year ago.
Anyways.
I got distracted in chat because someone was like, y'all should buy Apocalypse Keys. And ain't that the truth? Apocalypse Keys, if the vibe of these specific... what are they called again? They're not these ancestries?
Lineages.
Yeah.
Not race. Are like the vibe, that kind of like emo, like what is my life kind of vibe is speaking to you.
I'm looking at Apocalypse Keys. It's literally like BPRD right there.
Yeah, and it's written by Jamie, who was on our show and is going to be GMing for our new show starting in February. And it's a pretty cool game. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to hijack this D&D conversation to talk about Apocalypse World games.
Yo,
it's all right. They weren't even talking about D&D at that time.
Yeah,
we're talking about Young Justice.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, don't apologize.
Bring it back to gaming, friends.
I mean, Superboy is the most crushable. Y'all are right. Y'all are right in chat.
I like these like modified names: Superboy, Aqualad.
Oh God! Like this is just comic books. Comic books are just bullshit, Emma. Like Aqualad, Aquaboy, like, Superboy. There's multiple Superboys,
but younger.
The thing about Superboy is that name is super triggering for him. Like that name is like something he wants to leave behind because of his persona. This super masks. It's hard to leave his legacy.
Masks.
Oh,
yeah.
By the way, a great game too.
Also, he's got a pet puppy. Big puppy.
It's part of that.
Adam Lee is just fanning.
It's part of that healing process. I love me a Superboy storyline.
Oh yeah, me too. Anyway, where were we?
Adam Lee, were you gonna provide another spoiler and be like, he's not Superboy anymore, he's Superman now?
Well, I mean,
oh, Daniel.
Superboy Connor Kent was like erased from the comics for like 5 years. Yeah, like a long ass time, but because of various reasons, he's back now.
Yeah,
but God,
isn't he back now as a product of like the biological son of Superman?
There is a biological son of Superman who basically became Superboy for a while, but then because of stupid shenanigans, they decided to age him up and have him join the Legion of Superheroes, and they brought back old Superboy Connor Kent in the comics to be like Superboy. There's like two Superboys. Basically.
Is Connor Kent the one with the leather jacket?
Yeah, leather jacket and the S. Yeah.
It's not Superboy. It's the Metropolis Kid.
What is going on?
Yeah,
Emma, hold my hand.
never read
while
comics. It's just
Right?
while we
disappointing.
drift through.
Comics were a
think
mistake.
Comics were a mistake.
were
Wally West
mistake.
fans know that comics were a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
If-
Producer Daniel,
if we want to
taking
make
over.
this, if we want to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
this
yeah.
about
Okay.
the lineages again, I did have, I don't know if it's a question or a comment about the hex blood,
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go to it.
and it was mostly about why are hags not playable characters, and also
They are-
what
Yeah,
that's a weird way to retire your characters for them to become a hag. Also, like, justice for hags. Why can't I play one?
They are like
I would
classic
very much like to be
monster
a
They're,
hag.
manual.
they're monsters.
They're
That's the
classic
only
monster
reason why.
manual things, supernatural fey beings that are like basically emphasized to be it's like playing with like stereotypes like the witch in the swamp, that sort of
Yeah.
thing, but like kind of like outcasts from like the Feywild and stuff like that.
Right.
Midsummer Night's Dream, like
It's just a
the
trope.
kind of witch
Yeah.
trope. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
But
trope that
also,
has
like,
informed.
Just
the
a term
rules.
that's gotten thrown at women left, right, and center
Yeah.
Yeah.
for
Yes.
decades. So, like, I don't know enough about the specific like characters within D&D, but like
Jeremy Crawford put out a bunch of tweets talking about hags a couple years ago, I think,
Okay.
specifically saying that like the hags are not specifically women, they are Feywild beings, and he put out a long thing.
That helps.
Yeah.
pretty sure
I mean,
everyone's just going to like
Yeah,
say that they're like wild, weird women, and it's like,
Yeah.
if that's the case, like, why can't I play one?
I think
And that'd be cool. Hags
think-
is a playable lineage.
I think a great way to start that conversation, Emma, is Storied by PBS. They did a very recent Baba Yaga deep dive. And what I really liked about it, because I wasn't familiar with it outside of like the typical like chicken house, and that's all I really care about because that's great. But going into the actual stories and whatnot, there's a lot more to unpack about the perception of a hag and your actions and how you behave within a society where there are these types of oppression. And it seems like a lot of the Baba Yaga stories actually touch on those in very nuanced ways. So I found that to be quite good. And of course, Story by PBS is a great resource for any real inspiration when it comes to writing fantasy like this.
Yeah,
Baba
cool.
Yaga is also features fairly heavily in the Hellboy universe too.
And in John Wick,
That's what they call him.
that's what they call it.
Oh, Baba Yaga.
Daniel,
Yeah.
wasn't there a producer, Daniel, that was really
Sorry, I got distracted by the talk about the Baba Yaga because I started playing as that character in Smite, and I really had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've
doing
been
that.
bossing around Baba Yagas as Mulan. As I've known about Mulan's past.
You know, it'd be
Just
interesting.
bosses around Baba Yaga.
It'd be really interesting to actually have, hags as a playable lineage in the future. Because, I mean, there are, I think in Theros, you can play as Medusa, can't you? Or am I thinking about Ravnica? I forget.
I think it's Theros. I haven't read it.
I
I know
remember.
that in previous editions of D&D, they have actually taken these sort of like monstrous characters, and they have written rules for making a character with this. Like you saw
Or
that
maybe
in a
I'm-
lot of the old monster manuals.
Yeah. There is a, or maybe I'm thinking of
I don't know
like
why
the-
Emma and Steve are making.
Yeah,
these
what are Emma and
Because
Steve doing?
we
I'm
are
losing
literally
my
I'm
back.
not doing anything.
We are sorry,
Agatha?
and Steve. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
We are
Oh no.
we are literally back on topic, and y'all are just like.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, someone in the chat corrected me. It's not an official thing. There is the Odyssey of the Dragon Lord, a third-party book. You can play as Medusa and like
okay.
harpies and sirens. It's actually very interesting how they take these like Greek myths and like you can play as these characters. They're more complex than you might have realized.
Did you ever read the 3rd or 3.5 Deities and Demigods book?
Not cover to cover.
And they
Let's
just
see
like
the parts of
statted
it.
out all the gods so you could fight them.
Oh yeah,
It was
That's awesome.
ambitious.
It was very ambitious. It was like, oh, here are all the stats for Anubis because yes, you should be able to kill Anubis. Very
middling value.
yeah. It was not a great book.
But what you saw there was Agatha reeling me in. I was hooked because I think we need to kind of wrap things up, bring it back to shore, as it were.
The coast.
Conjurers of the shoreline.
Mages of
border
the
of
water
land
land
and
border.
I think what was the one I said? I said magic users of the border between land and water.
Perfect.
I-
Mwah.
That's the company. That's the company I'm starting.
Blizzards of the Most is my favorite.
Blizzards of the Most.
Blizzards.
Blizzards. Oh, Blizzards.
They're lizards that
I
split.
I thought you said Blizzards of the Moat, and I'm imagining a moat around a castle with little snow clouds. Like just
Okay, but that'd be a great company name. Someone take that.
Right.
We just do a whole line of merch, and it's just all like plays
Knockoffs?
on like knockoff Wizards of the Coast stuff. Oh, we're gonna get in trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go back to this. And I kind of want to end this sort of conversation because I know that we do need to take a break before we do our session 0 con stuff. And I kind of want to ask all of you what you want from 6th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Since we're talking about progress that Wizards is trying to make, and this has come up in this conversation, how, you know what, they are bound by that 5th edition skeleton. For 6th edition, there is no skeleton yet that we know of. So what would you like to see in that? Like, and this doesn't have to be a game mechanic. It doesn't have to be like, I would like them to get rid of advantage, disadvantage, or it's like, I would like them to bring back flat-footed armor class. It's not that.
Bring back real grappling
bring
rules.
back Thaco.
Oh, God.
I would like some flanking.
Yeah, I would like real flanking rules. No. It could be that, but it's like, what are some elements of their design philosophy that we would like to see in 6th edition D&D? Or what would you like in your D&D experience in 6th edition? That's what I'm asking. Sorry, I said burp. So what would everyone like? What's like one thing, since we have like 10 minutes left?
Would you like to go first, Daniel? Give Saul an example.
Sure. Yeah. For me, I would like to see more of an emphasis on the storytelling aspect of character creation, like what they're doing here with the Reborn, with the Dampier.
Oh damn! I should have gone first.
Ha! Gotcha.
Sorry.
I was like throwing it out there for you, but yeah, I would like to see more of an emphasis on the storytelling aspects of character creation, and then maybe how the storytelling aspects of character creation can impact the player's decisions on how they want their character to work mechanically. So that's what I would like in 6th edition.
Agatha?
Speaking of Jeremy Strandberg, is this a good segue? Actually, what I would like is basically for D&D to be like Jeremy's hack of Dungeon World, which is called Homebrew World, or I guess Stone Top, but more like, because in Homebrew World, which I keep telling people to play, this is a cool thing about the playbooks where you can choose from 4 different like backgrounds. So they're like, I don't remember. I think they're just called backgrounds or like heritage or something like that. And each one of them is very non-specific in terms of like cultural references, but they are evocative in terms of what kind of story hooks that you can get in, and also what kind of world creation you can do. Like one of the playbooks is called the Wielder, where you wield like a magical weapon basically, or the magical weapon controls you depending on which background you choose. And then like based on those, you get like basically like NPC questions, and then also questions that you would ask other players in the party that would like form your bonds, and then also create this world that you're all in. And I feel like that would be a fun thing. I don't know if that's realistic or if that's really in line with how D&D usually.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. If we're trying to innovate and we're constantly trying to work within what is in line with D&D, D&D is not going to change. So the question is like, how do you want to innovate? How do you want to,
innovate?
How do you want to be different?
So when it comes to innovating, I think that they should, they should basically just get Jeremy to put that in.
Nice. Nice.
and so
6E.
Yeah, so I've put a link to that to Homebrew World in our chat. So you folks can take a look at what it is.
You can get it for free,
Yeah.
people. Okay, I'm not getting paid to do this. I just think it's a great game.
amazing.
Yeah, incredible. So
I'll go next.
Steve.
My 6C, I have ambitious goals for 6C, and actually Bad Chili and Chad also kind of like touched on it. But D&D has been on the 3 pillars of combat, exploration, and social encounters. The character sheet, the game itself, do not rely on those 3 pillars. The only pillar is combat, pretty much. I would say 6E, basically you take your sheet and you make it 3 sections called combat, exploration, and social. And then you still do all your typical rolling and things like that. But then you specifically say that here are the things that are for combat, here are the things for exploration, and here are the things for social encounters. And you take D&D 6e and you make it 3 micro RPGs that get smushed together under one brand. And that's what people have been doing forever. For like 40 years, people have been like doing this. For 84 years, people have been doing this. So just make it explicit and then give them the guidance for it. And that is so great because you allow people to make content that focuses just on that one pillar. So for example, in that social thing, if you want to make a subset of rules about how someone you had a relationship with can come in and you can roll percentile die and they will join combat halfway through to
social
save you.
Combat.
That's wonderful. Like so, like someone.
What was it? The mysterious traveler in Fallout.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking more about in Shadows of Mordor, Shadows of War, your recruited orcs. There's a chance that once you recruit them and they're part of your allies, they will randomly just show up and save your life if you're in danger.
They're just like hanging out in the bushes, like they need my help.
Yeah, and like it's up to the player to like in their mind figure out how that makes sense. And usually your brain can like do it, and it's like not a big deal. But to have the guidance for a DM to like weave that in like a really nice way with the collaboration of the player, truly, I think could be a very meaningful impact, especially as you move into the post-combat social encounter of like, you're here.
Yeah. Okay, so we got myself, we got Agatha, we got Steve, Adam Ali, Emma, Jeremy. What do you want? And this could be a tool as well. It could be like, do you want these Unearthed Arcana things published as a magazine? Do you want Dragon magazine in print?
I would actually. So I can go. I would like Dragon Magazine back in print because I think there needs to be a venue for shorter adventures, and Dragon Magazine used to fulfill that. Dragon Magazine used to have optional rules, used to have shorter adventures,
and micro RPGs,
micro RPGs,
Clay-O-Rama.
Yeah, and now Dragon Plus, the digital one, is basically just an advertorial for new products and doesn't really hit that same niche. I would like there to be a new Dragon Magazine. I would like there to also be more books like Candlekeep Mysteries and Tales from the Yawning Portal, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, where it doesn't have to be like this long epic campaign from level 1 to they don't even go up to level 20, usually like level 12. There's room for, hey, give me a couple diverse adventures by different creators, give me like maybe a hub world to set them in, and let me run wild, because that is just so much more usable to me as someone who often is the one running games and having to read through an entire 250-page book, kind of like a novel, which unfortunately Wizards of the Coast lays out their books sort of like for reading pleasure, not really so much for ease of use when you're actually at the table. An anthology adventures, I would like to see more of those, and I think that would also enable Wizards to toss in all those extra settings that some fans keep wanting to see return, like Dark Sun or Spelljammer, Planescape. Just make it an anthology book.
Spelljammer,
yeah.
All right, Emma or Adam Ali?
Mine's super general, so I can go now. Like, I don't have enough basis for this, but based on everything I've seen and heard, I would really hope that a new edition is actually a new edition and not some revamped or like hobbling along version that pre-existed. So this is the time, make all of those changes, just go for it. Anyone who hates on that can just go and play the old versions. So yeah, make it new.
Yeah, and you know what, they have been doing that. Each edition of D&D has been different. Like 3 and 4, vastly different. 4 and 5, vastly different. But who's to say that they're not gonna? Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and a great way to get a new audience is to be like, here's a new version. Everyone's starting at 0.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yep. Here we go, guys. It's back from the ground up again.
No, that's like
I'm okay with that.
It's so like D&D's done a fairly good job of making brand new editions feel like brand new editions, but like for a while World of Darkness wasn't, and that was one of its biggest weaknesses. So I absolutely agree. That's like a good thing.
Welcome to my
to
homeland,
make sure.
Gaijin.
Oh fuck!
Every time someone has to say it.
What the fuck?
See, Steve, you didn't read Kindred of the East.
That's definitely the right response.
That's in a TTRPG. That's in a World of Darkness TTRPG book.
Oh, yeah.
I hope I don't have to run a panel with you in like an hour.
Nah.
Well, that would be unfortunate.
I mean, you could be like Agatha, just forget that we were doing it.
That's super unfair because we all kind of forgot.
We all kind of forgot. It happened. I forgot to do the paperwork like twice.
My recommendation is kind of multifolded, but the first is I want Wizards to get a group of cultural consultants from different backgrounds to sit with current 5th edition and literally just list everything that is partially or majorly problematic, so they're already starting off on the right foot. Like, these are the danger points. I know many people have done it before, piecemeal with different books, but we've never gotten like a round table of people who are vastly different opinions and backgrounds. Just sit with it from fresh and try and do their best to say, here's what needs to be flagged. And for D&D to take that and use 6th edition, trying to avoid those problems unless they intend to explore them to the degree by which they need to be explored. I don't think D&D is the best venture for that, but if an artist really wants to do that, I'm not going to scream no.
So it'd be like kind of like what Disney did with the High Republic when they were like, okay, let's just get everybody together and think about what we want this to be before we put it
Bingo bango. I was just about to say that. Star Wars. So, my other request, my other like thing would be to, from the start, make an effort in diversifying your world. So I would love it if all the player lineages, for example, started off with large groups of flavor text. I would love it if we returned a little bit back to the days of AD&D and we started off with a flavor about the history of the world, because I know some books don't do that. I think we need more grounding to help tell story and to help inspire story. The third thing, because this is story level, this is very selfish, but like Burn Bright was one of it's a game I love sometimes and I don't love other times, but one of the things I love the most about it is its story paths and using that for progression, and that is the thing that's more TTRPGs need to like outright steal.
I agree. I think the thing I dislike the most about Burn Bright is that you have to be online to play it.
Yeah. Nope, that's valid.
I think that's the biggest weakness of it.
But if you're going to do it online, do it on Roll20, right?
You have to do it on Roll20. You know what? Because Roll20 is our favorite virtual tabletop to play on.
It's true.
Thank you, Roll20, for your sponsorship.
It's just an accessibility thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, since Adam Ali got to say 3 things, I wanted to add one more. I want the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook to just be one book.
What?
Oof, sacrilege.
Sacrilege. That's never going to happen.
But I'm all for it. I'm all for it. And you know, because I mean, you could even throw in some of the monster manual in there. Call of Cthulhu does it. Yeah. You only need one book to actually run Call of Cthulhu, and it has 2 adventures in there also. And it's a different sort of game than D&D, but
Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide with a little bit of world building, a little bit of monsters, right? I think you put them all into one, because what I strongly dislike is that if you buy a Player's Handbook, you're like, I'm going to play D&D. What's the first thing you're going to get? The Player's Handbook, because I'm going to be a player of this game. And you read it and you're like, okay, well, how do I run this game? I need this book. Right?
Is it weird?
Go ahead, Em.
The only book I want is the monster manual, because I just want to read about the creatures.
No, that's super common. That's super
cool.
common.
Yeah, that's super common.
Yeah.
My buddy's dad owns a tattoo shop, and he has an AD&D monster manual. He doesn't know the game at all. He just likes the art.
Yeah.
Nice.
Some of the old, like the AD&D monster manual has there are 11 different kinds of beholders, and the art looks so goofy, and I love it so much.
And they kind of really do what you're describing, Daniel, in like the SRD and the basic rules, which in some ways the basic rules are better laid out than the actual player's handbook.
Yeah, but like if you're gonna get people to buy a book and you want them to play your game, I would.
Yeah,
put them
I'm
all
saying
up.
they should take that and actually like put it into the main product.
Yeah, but they won't do that because they want to
yeah.
sell multiple books. Because once you buy the D&D book, you kind of don't need to buy anything else.
I'm just saying that if you really want that, Daniel, I do also hope you get that pony for your birthday that you've been asking for, and a bunch of shooting stars happen, because that's the reality.
I know it's not going to happen, but you know what is going to happen after this? Session 0 Con is going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, again, make sure you follow us at AZNS Represent on Twitter, because we will be, sharing the links to all the Session 0 stuff that we do. If you're watching us live, session0con.com. Participate. We are speaking at the opening panel, and we're going to be talking about how we built this, what Asians Represent is, what we plan to do with Asians Represent, and just how this all started. We're going to be talking about the importance of marketing, the importance of just being on screen. And we only did this because of Jade, because Jade was like, y'all got to be on camera. So always going to shout out Jade for that. But yeah, Jeremy, Emma, Anna-Malie, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Wrap Up. I'm glad we got to share a meal together, even remotely. I'm glad we got to agree on things. I'm grateful that we even got to disagree on things, because I think it's just so important that we disagree on things, because that's how conversation starts. That's how we move this hobby forward, and that's how we also show the world that it's okay to disagree on things in this hobby. And this is just a part of being a gamer, and this is a part of interacting with other people. So I'm just
We're still friends.
We're still yeah, of course we're still friends.
Damn, Daniel.
Look, Agatha and I are practically the same person.
Yeah.
So
We're not friends. We are literally two.
You are
sides of
literally
the
the same.
coin.
Look, I'm just so grateful that I get to do this. I'm so grateful that Steve, Agatha, we get to do this. Ooh, I just went all blurry. Steve, Agatha, we get to do this every Friday. Next week we'll be talking about Star Wars in TTRPGs. There's one spot left if you want to be a guest. So hit us up. As usual, we will be sharing the Discord server link in our Twitch chat. So we have a couple spots left. Steve, how many spots do we have left in our server?
Last I checked, just around 20, maybe just under 20.
Sweet. So join us on our Discord server. This is where it should work. The command should work. Darn it!
That's okay. That's okay.
I made the command. It should be. Doesn't matter. That the conversation has to continue. Yeah, the command is live.
Is it?
It's
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, maybe I don't have permission. But in either case, it's actually less invites than I thought it was. It's about a dozen right now.
Sweet.
Which is, not to say that, if you are a lurker or you like to just kind of be part of the community, but you don't feel, if you feel like kind of imposter syndrome where you don't want to take the space, get rid of that. If you can, get rid of that emotion. We love people just to be there, be present. If you don't want to enjoy and participate in the conversations, reactions are totally a valid way to participate. Or even if you don't want to even do that, you just want to read the content and you feel like you get value out of that, we highly encourage you to join. Invitations are only limited because we want to make sure that this space stays as safe as we can with the current moderation that we have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One other thing I want to say, we also have a spot open on our Karator, the Eastern Realms read crew. I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, actually, but we can talk off air. We have one of our community members, Austin, is actually joining us. I'm super excited for Austin to join us, but I wanted to round it up because we had 5, and I think 6 would be great because I want to get other perspectives in there. So yeah, we're going to be doing that in the future, first Saturday of every month. That's actually next Saturday. We're going to be reading through it.
It's soon.
It's gonna get goofy, so can't wait. That said, everyone,
I won't be able to because I work on Saturdays. But
dang it, that's
Yeah,
okay.
I'm gonna
Sorry,
be
guys,
on
yeah.
it.
Yeah, Agatha.
Agatha. Done.
Agatha,
Sorry,
boom.
the spots are
We
full.
no
Sorry,
longer
folks.
have a spot.
They no longer have a spot. Agatha is on it.
Amazing.
That said, folks, take care of yourselves. We'll see you on the Discord server. We'll see you on social media. And we'll see you next time on the wrap-up. Bye, everybody.